Greetings, dear viewers, aboard our space voyage to the second part of our fascinating story. Today, we will plunge into the depths of space, where not only the stars keep their secrets, but also our heroes face unimaginable challenges. Imagine that a powerful space station, worth trillions, can stop because of the loss of an insignificant part. But not everything is as simple as it seems. In this part, we are expected not only the struggle to restore the system, but also secret intrigues, betrayal and search for the truth, which may cost our heroes much more than they expected. Planetary Illusion. Chapter 2. What's that word? He asked. Just getting ready to remove the control box cover, I said. I got the tool out and started to remove the cover. With the cover off, I looked inside and saw the problem. One of the gears that make up the drive system had sheared off and broken. The E-clamp that held it in place was also missing. I looked to see if it was lying around in the bottom of the sealed unit, but it wasn't there. It was missing. Completely. Shit, I said. What? Asked Alan. Someone has been in that device, sir, I said. The E-clamp is gone, and the drive gear is sheared off and broken. What would happen if guns were involved? The force of the drive impact would have completely destroyed the system. If lasers were firing at the same time, they could have cut through the hull, I said. Damn, how do you think that could have happened? He asked. I shook my head. Someone must have done it on purpose, I said. I don't see how a clip could just go missing like that. The thing is, these devices are usually sealed. The only way to get inside is with a special tool. This one, I added, holding the tool in my hand. Can it be fixed? He asked. Of course, I said. There are spare control units in the armory. But it's not the kind of part that usually breaks, and we only have 2 spare control units. Hopefully, none of the others are damaged. How long will it take to repair? The whole unit has to be disassembled, a new control unit installed, tested, adjusted, and calibrated. About 8 to 10 hours in total, and that's assuming there are no other problems. Damn, he said. All right, install a new control unit. You need my help? Although it was time-consuming, it was a one-man job, and I really didn't need his help. Still, what he offered meant a lot, and I began to respect him even more for it. I shook my head. No, sir, I can manage, but thank you for asking anyway, I said. Besides, there's only room for 1 pair of hands. At that moment, my wrist communicator beeped. I looked and saw it was a call from Robinson. Jones, go ahead, Robinson, I said, turning to the communicator. Boss, it looks like the E-clamp has broken off, and the drive gear is completely sheared off, he said. I looked at Alan. We need to replace the entire control box. All right, I said. Proceed. Contact the armory and have them inspect all the weapons platforms. On it, he said. What's the probability of 2 control units breaking down at the same time? Asked Alan. Very subtle, I said. I've never seen one of these units break like that, let alone 2 at the same time. These are probably the most stable platforms in our arsenal. Perhaps it's a manufacturing problem? He asked. Very unlikely, sir, I said. These devices go through extensive testing before installation. I've worked with hundreds of these devices, and I've never seen this happen. Okay, I need to report this to Houston, Alan said. We'd better get the engineers from the Martian station down here and delay a full level 5 diagnostic. It's hard to believe a trillion-dollar spacecraft can be stopped by a 50-cent E-clip. I grinned. Report back to me as soon as you're done. Yes, sir, I said. I watched him make his way out of the cramped quarters and went back to my work. When the control box was completely removed, I took a closer look to see what else I could find. There, on the inside of the hull, was a dark spot. It didn't look like transmission grease. When I looked closer, I realized it was blood. Whoever had sabotaged this device had cut their hand on the casing. I pulled a pair of tweezers out of the toolbox and managed to get some of the substance. I then put it in a small plastic bag, sealed it, and put it back in the tool bag. I intended to take it to a medical facility for DNA testing. By then, one of the armorers had brought in a new control box and took the old one away. I turned back to my work and tried to concentrate on what I was doing, but it was difficult. I thought about who could have done this and why. And then it hit me. Bull did everything he could to keep Tabby and me apart during this trip. First, the shift schedule changed. Of course, he offered an explanation. Alan accepted it, but I didn't believe it. Then, this happened. And what did he say when he and Tabby left for Huygens? Something about taking care of Tabby? Maybe. The thought that Tabby might have cheated on me with him made me furious and nauseous at the same time. I knew Bull had been her counselor at the academy, and I also knew they'd served together a couple of times since then. Had she really been doing something with him back then? I finally finished installing the new control box and did a dry test. Everything seemed to be in order, and I made an entry in the maintenance log. 10 hours of my life were gone. 10 hours that I would never get back. 10 hours I was supposed to spend on Huygens with Tabby. Finished, I looked through the entire log, but saw nothing that would give me a clue. I saw Robinson as I climbed out of the access tube. "How'd it go?" I asked him. "The new unit is in place, sir," he said. "Armorers have checked the rest of the stations and have reported no other problems. Anyway, I want to do a full visual inspection of everything, as well as a physical inventory of all weapons and missiles," I said. "I know it will ruin your shore leave, but it needs to be done." "I understand, sir," he said. "I'll look into it." "Thank you," I said. He nodded his head, smiled, and turned to his work. On my way to the bridge, I stopped in sickbay and talked to the corpsman on duty. "How are you doing, Lieutenant Jones?" the female senior asked as I walked in. "Are you willing to do a DNA test?" I asked. "We have the equipment, but the final analysis has to be verified by a certified laboratory," she said. "Why do you ask?" I pulled out my sample and held it out to her. "I need to know whose blood it is," I said. "Can you do that?" "Of course," she said. "It'll take hours, and we'll have to compare it to the DNA we have on file." "Why would you want to do that?" "I really can't get into that right now, Chief," I said. "I just need to know whose it is, and I need you to keep that under your hat." She looked at me in surprise. "Okay, Lieutenant," she said. "I'll look into it and send you a message when I have something." "Thanks, Chief. I owe you one," I said. "Damn right, sir," she said with a smile. She was quite attractive, and for a moment I wondered what her figure looked like, but only for a moment. After that, I headed to the bridge to make my report. Alan was standing at the hatch leading to his ready room when I went up to the bridge. "Fixed it?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "Lieutenant Robinson is checking the rest of the systems now." "All right. Step into my office, if you would be so kind," he said. I walked into the ready room and saw Alice with Lieutenant Commander Carson, the ship's senior security officer. When Alan entered the small room, he closed the hatch and took his seat. "Thank you for showing up so quickly," he said, looking at Alice and Commander Carson. "I'm sorry to interrupt your shore leave, Alice, but it seems we have a situation here, and I need you and Commander Carson to deal with it immediately." "No problem, sir," she said. "It appears we have a saboteur aboard," Alan said. "Two of our weapons systems appear to have been sabotaged shortly before arriving at Mars Station, and I've been assigned by command to conduct an initial investigation. I've also been assigned to contact the Core Criminal Investigations Division on Huygens. They won't be able to get anyone in here for at least 36 hours, so you have that time to figure out everything you can. I'm temporarily giving you both access to the entire tracker history. I want to know who accessed those weaponized units, and I want to know that as soon as possible. I want this investigation to be thorough but discreet. Do you understand me? I don't want the crew members to find out," he said. "We understand, sir," Commander Carson said. "In the meantime, a team of engineers from Mars is running full diagnostics on the ship at level 5. It will take about 72 hours. Command doesn't want us heading out with a possible saboteur on board, and I agree with them. It's quite possible the mission will be cancelled," Alan said. "Any questions or comments?" "Just one, sir," I said. All eyes turned to me. "Yes, Lieutenant?" asked Alan. "I found blood on the control box housing I replaced. I took a sample to sick bay for DNA analysis," I said. "Good idea," Alan said. "I'll swing by sick bay. Who did you give the sample to?" "Chief Benson, sir," I said. He nodded his head in acknowledgement. "Okay, I'll talk to her when I get there. Thank you. Anything else?" We all shook our heads. Dismissed. You have a job to do. Yes, sir, Commander Carson said. We left the ready room, and I locked my tool bag on the weapons console. I was about to leave the bridge when Alice called out to me. Yes, ma'am, I said, giving her my attention. Bill, I've been watching Tubby and Commander Travers for a while. I'm sorry, but it seems to me that they're know each other too well, if you know what I mean, she said. She pulled out her cell phone and showed me the pictures. I was shocked by what I saw. Tubby and Bull were walking into the club hand in hand. Alice had pictures of them dancing and drinking, acting like two teenagers on a date. There was the usual flirting and touching, and Alice had pictures of them kissing. Then she showed me pictures of them walking into the hotel. It didn't take a scientist to figure out what they were doing there. I'm sorry, Bill, she said quietly. I thought you should know. Thank you, Alice, I said, holding back tears. Are you going to report this to the captain? You know I have no choice but to report it, she said. But I thought you should be the first to know. I appreciate that, I said. I left the bridge and caught up with Robinson. We finished sorting out the rest of the systems and took inventory of everything. My shift was over and I went to the galley and had a snack, then went back to my quarters and tried to sleep. It wasn't easy, with images of Tubby and Bull in my mind's eye, but I managed to stay awake for a few hours. I woke up, showered, dressed, and was about to leave when Tabby came into the cabin. She looked rested, and her face was as radiant as it always was after our meals. Part of me wanted to kill her. Did you have a good time? I asked in a neutral tone. Yes, as a matter of fact, we are, she said. We've just gotten back. I'm sorry you couldn't join us. Maybe next time. I just looked at her. What's going on? I saw all the engineers on the station. Maintenance, I said. So, what's on your agenda? Well, I'm going to lie down for a while. I'm really tired, and I'm off duty for the next 12 hours. Are you going on duty now? Yes, I said. Were you able to solve that little problem? I think so. Good, she said. You know, I missed you out there. Really? That's not what I heard, I said. What does that mean? I hear you and Bull had a good time without me, I said. Is there anything you want to tell me? We danced a little bit, she said. Had a couple drinks each, but that's about it. Nothing else happened? I asked. Of course not, she said, feigning shock. What makes you think that? Nothing, I said. I have to go to work. I headed for the door, but Tabby stopped me. She tried to kiss me, but I turned my head, and she kissed my cheek. Bill, you know I love you, she said. What's going on? You tell me, I said. I left the cabin without giving her a chance to answer. Who is this woman? I asked myself. Did she really think she could come to me right after being in love with some other guy and expect me to act like there was no problem? Did she really think I wouldn't be able to discern her lies? I entered my station and realized I hadn't seen Bull. I went about my normal business and moved on to my current diagnostics. About 7 hours into my shift, I realized I hadn't eaten anything, so I signed off and took a break for lunch. I decided to go to my quarters and see Tabby for a bit before returning to duty. I had planned to talk things over with her, but when I opened the hatch, what stood before me was something no husband should ever have to see. The double bed that Tabby and I shared had both of them lying on it. I felt an increase in gravity and looked to see that the gravity in the cabin was set at 0.9 G. They both turned around to see who was standing in the open hatch. Tabby jumped off the bed and he turned to me with a smirk on his face. "Close the damn hatch," he growled. "What are you, some kind of pervert or something? You like to peep on other people?" "What's going on here?" I asked. Tabby found something interesting on the deck to gawk at while Bull rose to his feet. "What does it look like, Lieutenant?" he asked, pulling on his clothes. "Didn't they teach you sex education in school?" He finished putting on his flight suit and headed toward me. "Let's take a walk, Lieutenant. We need to talk." He turned to Tabby. "I'll be back, and we can finish this conversation later." Tabby looked at me with sad eyes. "I'm sorry, Bill," she said quietly. "We'll talk about it later," I said. Bull shook his head. "No, Lieutenant," he said. "Come on, follow me." As we turned, I activated the video recording function on my suit. All of our suits had a TV camera function that could be activated when needed. I had a very bad feeling about this, and I wanted our encounter to be recorded. I must commend you, Lieutenant. It was a great idea to reduce the gravity in your quarters, Bull said, as we walked down the corridor. But you should know that I've been here a little longer than you have. It didn't take me long to realize what you did. How long? I asked. You mean, for how long, sir? Don't you, Lieutenant? He asked with a smirk. I remained silent, prompting him to continue. Well, I suppose you have a right to know. It started in my second year at the academy. I was her counselor, you know. She came to me with a problem. I was able to solve it, but it cost her money, and it just kept escalating. You know, she almost broke up with you a couple times during your time at the academy. You see, women, once they feel the bull, they can't let go. He must have thought he was funny, because he laughed at his own joke. I felt nothing but rage. I wanted to kill him on the spot, but I had no desire to ruin my career over this piece of shit. So you spend time with her every chance you get, huh? I asked. Sure, Lieutenant, he said. You know, you should be a goddamn investigator. And that's the real reason you changed the bridge schedule, isn't it? I asked. Right again, Jones, he said. And the reason you sabotaged those weapon systems, I added. Just between you and me, yes, he said. But you see, after the skipper informed me of the sabotage, I did a little investigation of my own, he added, taking the word investigation in quotation marks. So, what do you intend to do next? I asked. Are you planning on beating me up or killing me? He laughed as we turned the corner and entered the elevator. He pressed the third deck button and waited for the elevator doors to close. Of course not, Lieutenant, he said. You think I'd kill a highly trained officer just for this fool? For the moment, yes, I said. The elevator doors opened and he stepped out, gesturing for me to follow him. That's where you're wrong, he said. You see, according to my investigation, which I have just completed, you caught your wife cheating on you. Distraught, you set about sabotaging the weapon systems, hoping to frame your wife's lover. When she told you that she intended to divorce you for him, you became desperate and killed yourself. He stopped, and I saw that we were standing in front of the starboard airlock, the airlock that was on the opposite side of the station from where we were docked. The inner hatch was open, and I saw that all the spacesuits in the airlock had been removed. I also saw the semi-automatic pistol in his hand, strapped to his right wrist. I wondered when he had put it on, and realized that he must have hidden it in his spacesuit. You've got it all figured out, haven't you? I asked. Yeah, he said with a smirk on his face. Don't worry, Lieutenant. After you leave, I'll take care of her properly. Now get to the airlock. You'll never get away with it, I said. He laughed at that. Yeah? Who do you think Command will believe? A pisket who can't even give enough to his own wife, or a 20-year veteran of spaceflight? Now get in the airlock, he said. I looked around and assessed the situation. Looking at the nearest gravity regulator, I saw that it was set at 0.8 G. Not ideal, but I figured it was for the best. It was now or never. I jumped up as high as I could and put one hand on the bulkhead. I kicked as hard as I could, twice, and caught him by surprise, hitting him in the face both times. The force of the blow threw him back into the airlock, where he landed on the floor. I could see blood on his face where I had hit him. Once he landed, I rushed to the control panel and quickly closed and locked the hatch. He shook his head, surprised at what had just happened. He looked at me, furious. Open the damn door, Lieutenant, he shouted. Just one question, Commander, I said. What? Did Tabitha know what you were planning to do? Of course she did, he said. It was her idea. Now open the damn door. I won't tell you anymore, he added, raising his gun. He cocked the trigger and took aim right at me. Now, damn it! I looked at the controls before answering. Yes, sir, I hissed, pressing the brightly lit button. His eyes widened as he realized what I had done. The outer door hissed open and the air from the room rushed out into the open. Caught off guard, he stumbled to his own feet and quickly found himself in the harshest environment known to man. I watched his body tumble through space as he left the ship. I knew he would only last 15 seconds without a spacesuit. There is no pressure in space, and I knew that the air left in his lungs would rapidly expand and painfully tear his lung tissue. He would either freeze to death or die of suffocation. I pressed the button to activate the comms. "Man overboard, number 2 starboard airlock," I said. Instantly, the alarm sounded, and a crowd appeared at the airlock. I looked up and saw Alan running toward me. Next to him was Alice. A few moments later, I saw Tabby. "Commander Travers, sir," I said. I handed him a tiny drive containing a videotape of the last few minutes. He admitted to sabotaging the weapon, and admitted to having an affair with Lieutenant Jones. He also admitted that he planned to kill me and frame it as a suicide. "It's all here." "Bull," exclaimed Tabby, peering into the airlock. By now, the force of Bull's ejection had sent his body into an unstable orbit around Mars, and it would take hours to recover, if at all. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "You killed him," she screamed. "You fucking bastard! You killed him! I hate you! Do you hear me? I hate you!" "That will be enough, Lieutenant," Alan ordered. He grabbed Tabby by the shoulders and handed her to the orderlies. "Take her to sickbay. Get her under control. Then hand her over to security." He turned to me as the orderlies carried her away. "You know what to do, Lieutenant," he said sadly. "I have no choice. You are relieved of all duties for the duration of the investigation. I'll look into it." "Yes, sir," I said quietly. "Okay, that's enough," Alan ordered. "Get back to work. There's nothing more we can do here." Before he spoke again, he turned to Commander Carson. "When she calms down, give her a statement. I don't want her anywhere near the bridge. Call Mars Station and find out how to recover Commander Travers's body." "Yes, sir," Carson said, before walking away. Then Alan turned to Alice. "Looks like you just got promoted, Alice," he said. "Until further notice, you're my number 1. You'll need to adjust your bridge assignments. After that, the mission will probably be cancelled." "I understand, sir," she said. "Commander Carson and I have completed our initial investigation, sir. We'd like to discuss our findings with you." "In my room, number 1, he said. "Immediately." "Yes, sir," she said. Before she left, she turned to me. "I'm sorry, Bill," she said to me. "You didn't deserve any of this." "Thank you, Commander," I said, and headed to my quarters. Once there, I pulled out all of Tabby's things and put them in her duffel bag. I didn't want her anywhere near me, and I knew she would probably be assigned the cabin originally designated for the chief pilot, which was now empty. A couple hours later, someone from security came and took her things. I didn't know where they had taken them, and frankly, I didn't care. I turned over the rubberized mattress and replaced the soiled bedding, tossing the old one into the laundry basket. I knew that until further notice, I would be confined to my quarters, and my access would be limited to the galley and gym. So I sat down at the computer console in my stateroom and started going through the JAG forms until I found the one that contained the divorce request. I filled out a form requesting a divorce on the grounds of adultery. Since our marriage was under the jurisdiction of the JAG Corps, the divorce also had to be finalized by them. There was nothing to divide, and there were no children. We each had the same salary, so there was no support. It was a simple division, where she kept what was hers and I kept what was mine. I asked that she give up my last name and return her rings. After checking everything, I clicked Submit and waited for confirmation that the request had been received by the JAG system. It's amazing how fast the system works sometimes. Within 24 hours of the incident, I was talking to not 1, but 2 agents from Huygens CIA. It was clear to me that they were trying to make the case that I had acted out of revenge. The JAG officer they took with them to represent me at the interrogation did not allow me to make any statements that could incriminate me. For the next 24 hours, I was on edge, wondering if I would be taken into custody. I spent most of the time pacing back and forth in my quarters. I knew that what Tubby and Bull had done would now be common knowledge on the ship, so I purposely stayed away from the galley during regular meal times so I wouldn't run into the rest of the crew. I was sitting on my bed when I heard a knock on the hatch. I wondered if it was station security coming to take me into custody, and I braced myself for the worst. "It's open," I said. When the hatch opened, I saw Alan and Alice standing there. I turned my attention to them as they entered the small room. "As it was, Lieutenant," Alan said, sitting down in his chair. Alice sat down as well. I relaxed and sat back down on the bed. The Mars station had recovered Commander Travers's body. They also took the illegal firearm that was strapped to his arm. We've reviewed all the evidence, and the CIU report says you acted in self-defense. The tracking history logs show that Commander Travers was at both weapon stations, where the sabotage took place just before Lieutenant Robinson noticed the calibration error, Alice added, and the DNA from the blood you found matches the commander's. Put that together with what he admitted to you, and it becomes clear that he was the one who sabotaged both of those systems, Alan said. Your wife claims she knew nothing about the sabotage, but she supposedly knew what he intended to do to you. But Travers told me it was her idea, I said. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Who knows? At any rate, she's being held in the brig as an accessory to Commander Travers' plot to assassinate you. Perhaps she'll be charged with conspiracy, but that's up to the authorities on Earth. So we're going back to Earth, sir? I asked. He nodded his head. It is, Bill, he said. The mission has been cancelled, at least for the moment. Command intends to hold a board of inquiry when we get back. Does that mean I can go back to work? I asked. It took some work, but I convinced Houston that you were needed on the bridge since we're down 2 officers. Think you can handle both ops and gunnery? Alice tells me you're ready to handle ops. Yes, sir, I said. Good, he said. We launch in 12 hours, so I want you rested and ready to go. Thank you, sir, I said. Is it okay if I see my wife? I need some answers. Are you sure you want to do this, Bill? He asked. I'm absolutely sure, sir, I told him. He thought for a moment, then nodded his head. All right, Bill, he said at last. I'll allow it, but on the condition that you be accompanied by Commander Brewster. Do you agree, Alice? Yes, sir, she said. That's right, he said. Well, get down to business, son, and then get some rest. It's high time you started making money here. Yes, sir, I said. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. When he left, Alice looked at me. Are you ready, Lieutenant? She asked. I nodded my head. Yes, ma'am, I said. We got out and headed for the brig, located on the lower deck of the ship. Don't tell anyone I told you this, but Captain Simmons has declared a commendation for you, she said. For what? I asked, surprised. He says your actions saved not only your life, but the lives of many of your comrades. Had Travers fired that weapon while in the airlock, there is no telling what damage it would have done to the ship, she said. Shit, I said. She smiled. Congratulations, she said. We finally made it to the brig and checked in with the security officer on duty. Then we walked to a tiny 7-by-6-foot cell where Tabby sat on the bed, dressed in an orange jumpsuit. What do you want, Lieutenant? She asked, sarcasm and mockery in her voice. So now it's Lieutenant, not even Bill or Lieutenant Jones, I said. Okay, have it your way, prisoner. I just have a few questions and then I'll leave you alone. Ask your questions, Lieutenant, she said, looking straight ahead, not even bothering to look at me. How long have you been doing it with that freak? Since sophomore year at the academy, she said. He was my counselor. I know, I said. Where did it all start? Do you really want to know? She asked. Yeah, I know, I said. Okay, since you asked. I failed the test. He corrected it for me. I almost lost the assignment, but I didn't. Thanks to him, I was able to retake the test. I was indebted to him, so I decided to do this thing with him. I enjoyed it and kept doing it. So, you two cheated on each other, and then you repaid him by cheating on me. Is that it? Yes, she said. You have no idea how much pleasure I've gotten out of it. And you know what? I loved it. I loved it. You know what else? What? I asked, ready to throw up after what she had just told me. He was so much better than you. And you were with him all those times you worked with him? When we can, she said. You know it's almost impossible in low class. So we practiced our games before we left and after we got back. Did you ever love me? Or is it all a lie? I loved you, she said. But everything else I loved doing with him. And that's all there was. Nothing more. All right, you knew what he was going to do once we were on board, didn't you? Yeah, I knew. I knew he was going to spread out the shifts so we couldn't see each other often. But he didn't think you'd find a way to carve out time to talk to me. To be honest, neither did I. But you tricked us both. So we decided to wait until we got to Mars, she said. And you knew he would sabotage the weapons platforms? I knew he was going to do something, but I didn't know what, she said. All I knew was that he was going to make it so you couldn't take shore leave. We didn't think you were going to turn this into a federal case. And me throwing myself out of the airlock was just icing on the cake, right? He told me it was your idea. Really? Did you really hate me so much you wanted to kill me? It was his idea, she said, but you put up with it. You never once did anything or told anyone to stop it, did you? No, it wasn't, she said quietly, and I'm sorry about that. I didn't think he'd really do it. Well, he tried, and he failed, and you're going to end up in jail for your part in it. I hope it was worth it for you. By the way, I filed for divorce. Big deal, she said, shrugging her shoulders. I shook my head and stood up. I was so proud of you, the way you handled that ship. I loved you with all my heart. But now, I wish I had never met you. I can't wait to testify against you at your court-martial. Goodbye, fool. I turned to leave and heard her calling my name. I'm sorry, Bill, she cried. Really, I'm sorry. Without looking back, I raised my middle finger and continued walking. After returning to Earth, Tabby was placed in a federal prison, where she was held throughout the inquest and court-martial. Several crew members, including myself, Alan and Alice, were called to testify. We spent hours testifying and answering questions from several investigators and high-ranking officers. The worst were the days spent waiting for something, anything, to happen. The only thing that happened was the approval of my divorce, which was received in early April. All that was left was to file in state court, which the JAG officer said he would do. Finally, on Friday, April 18th, we were called into the hearing room to learn our fate. Alan, Alice and I sat in one row, and Tabby was led into the hall. Like us, she was in uniform, but unlike us, she was wearing chains around her ankles and wrists. 2 armed prison guards in black uniforms accompanied her, ready for action. We all stood as the council members were ushered into the hall, their uniforms adorned with ribbons and gold braids, denoting their rank. The senior councilman, Admiral Cartwright, opened the meeting. Please be seated, he began. First of all, let me say that this is simply a board of inquiry, not a trial. Our job is to find out what happened and make recommendations so it doesn't happen again. He then read the council's summary of what had happened on the trip to Mars. He concluded with a simple statement. In sum, Commander Traverse's personal agendas took precedence over his duty to the ship, captain, crew, and the Corps, resulting in a violation of the law, not to mention a number of established protocols. As a result of his actions, many of those who served aboard the Armstrong were put in danger and the ship was disabled, he said. He turned his attention to me. Senior Lieutenant William Jones, he said. Hearing my name, I froze in place. He looked at me for a moment before continuing. Lieutenant Jones, the board has reviewed all of the evidence in this case and has concluded that your actions not only saved your own life, but quite possibly the lives of many of your shipmates. In addition, your diligence, initiative, and attention to detail helped find and eliminate deliberate sabotage that could have easily cost the lives of many people, not to mention a $1 trillion spacecraft. This board has reviewed your record, and we agree with Captain Simmons's assessment. As a result, we approved his recommendation to award you the Distinguished Service Medal. In addition, we believe your talents will be of great benefit to the Corps in our future endeavors. You can expect your orders to arrive at the Spacecraft Advanced Operations School for classes that will begin June 1st. Congratulations, and best of luck. Thank you, sir, I said. The Admiral nodded his head and turned his attention to Alan. Captain Alan Simmons, he said. Alan stood at attention. Please understand that the Council believes that you have done the best you can under the circumstances. We understand your desire not to undermine the authority of senior personnel in the eyes of the crew, and frankly, none of us have ever faced a situation like this before. Nevertheless, as captain and master of your ship, you are directly responsible for everything that happens on it. I understand, Admiral, Alan said. The Council agrees that you should remain in command of the USS Armstrong. However, there is an entry on your record. The Armstrong is currently undergoing modernization and a new crew assignment will be made. We agree that Lieutenant CM Brewster would be a good choice as first officer. Therefore, the board recommends that she be immediately promoted to commander and assigned to the first officer position. You can expect a new set of mission orders in the near future, he said. "Thank you, Admiral," Alan said. Then the Admiral shifted his gaze to Tabby. "Senior Lieutenant Tabitha Abernathy," he said, calling Tabby by her maiden name, which she had to take as a result of her divorce. Tabby stood up as the others did. "It would be an understatement to say that this board is very disappointed in you. Not only have you dishonored your ex-husband, you have dishonored your uniform and the service as a whole. Your actions in this whole sordid affair, no pun intended, may well have jeopardized the lives of many of your shipmates, including your ex-husband. As a result of statements entered into the record by both you and Commander Travers, we have been forced to evaluate your entire record, including your work at the Academy. We have been able to confirm that Commander Travers, acting as your counselor, intervened to help you pass the test you initially failed. Had he not intervened on your behalf, you likely would not have passed the test and would not have received your commission. Of course, your record as a pilot was exemplary, but we can't help but believe that you should not have received your commission to begin with. The liaison you engaged in with Commander Travers cost him his life, and nearly cost the lives of your ex-husband and several others. Your actions can only be described as unworthy of your position. We understand that you are currently facing court-martial for your actions, but this board recommended to the personnel office that you be stripped of your commission and reduced in rank and pay to an E1 crewman. They have agreed, and your new rank and pay are effective immediately. Take her away," he said, turning to the guards. They turned her toward the door and started to walk her out, but she stopped as she approached Alan, Alice, and me. "Bill," she began, tears streaming down her face. "Be careful when you address me, crewman," I said stiffly. She jumped up and looked straight ahead, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Permission to address you, Lieutenant," she said. "Denied," I growled. "Get that thing out of my sight," I ordered the guards. They froze in anticipation. "Yes, sir." They took her under the arms and led her out while she sobbed. I didn't care what she said at that point. "A copy of the Council's findings will be sent to each of you and placed in your permanent file. The Council meeting is adjourned," Admiral Cartwright announced, banging the gavel. We stood as the Council left the room. After they left, Alan turned to me. "Well, that wasn't so bad," he said. "Why don't we have a beer or something? I'm parched." "I think it's pretty good, sir," Alice said. "What the hell?" I added. We left the building and headed to the O Club, where we continued to enjoy a nice high. The epilogue is 17 months later. Standing at the airlock leading to the Galileo station orbiting the dark side of Mars, I thought back over the past 17 months. Tubby's court-martial had concluded a month before I'd enrolled in the School of Advanced Spacecraft Management. I'd testified for the prosecution, of course, and I'd done so with gusto, though I hated to think of the time I'd spent with her and Bull on Armstrong. When she was brought in, Tabby looked pretty damn attractive. This time she was wearing a crewman's uniform and no flight wings. She had lost weight, and her eyes were sad and sunken. She had lost everything she loved. Her rank, her wings, the man she had once called husband and lover. She had also lost all hope of a career as a pilot. No matter what happened to her today, her record was forever tarnished, and she would never take the helm of another spaceship, civilian or military. The members of the court-martial entered the courtroom, and we all stood until we were told we could take our seats. The judge looked at the members of the jury and asked if a verdict had been reached. "We have reached a verdict, Your Honor," said the senior member, a full commander. When asked, the commandant said that the jury found Tabby guilty of being an accessory to the attempted murder of me, but not guilty of the conspiracy charge. Apparently, the defense won the argument that it was all he said she said, and there was no direct evidence that she was actively involved in the conspiracy to kill me. However, there was ample evidence that she knew of Travers' plan to throw me out of the airlock, but did nothing to prevent it. The judge did not spare her and sentenced her to 10 years hard labor in a federal prison. At the end of that 10-year term, she was also to receive a dishonorable discharge. The judge thanked the jury and banged his gavel, concluding the case. Tabby was let out the same way she was brought in chains. She never once looked at me or tried to talk to me. I reported to my class, which was in Florida, near Cape Canaveral, and enjoyed the training. I also enjoyed the weather and the scenery, which included many women. After a year and a half, we graduated and I was promoted to lieutenant commander. I also received a number of orders that brought me here to Galileo. This station, unlike the Mars station, was a closed facility that orbited the red planet in such a way that it could not be seen from Earth. I had no idea what was going on here, and I was curious to say the least. When the door opened, I was greeted by an attractive female captain who was taking my orders. I introduced myself and shook her hand. "Pleased to meet you, Commander Jones," she said. "I'm Captain Hawkins. I am familiar with your service on the Armstrong and have heard good things about you from Captain Simmons. I've also spoken to Alice Brewster." I looked at her, saying nothing for a while. She told me what happened, and I'm sorry. I assure you that won't be a problem here. "So, are you ready to look at your house for the next few years?" "Years?" I asked. She smiled and led me to the observation deck. When I joined her, she pressed a button and the glass in front of us dissipated. My eyes popped up to my forehead when I saw the monstrous ship in front of me. "This is the biggest, fastest, and most advanced ship in the fleet, Commander. And you will be my operations officer, so you're my number 2. Are you ready for adventure?" I saw her eyes sparkle when she said that. "Absolutely, Captain," I said. "Where are we headed?" "If all goes well, Commander, Alpha Centauri." I looked at her, shocked. It was just over 4 light years away. "The plan is to break the light barrier. If everything works as stated, we'll be there in less than 2 years. "Is that even possible?" I asked. She smiled and nodded her head. "If the engineers are right, yes," she said. "Shit," I said. She laughed. "We launch in 15 days, Commander," she said. "You have a lot of homework to do, so you'd better get started on it. I like to give staff briefings at 0800 every day." "Yes, ma'am," I said. She held out her hand and I took it. "I have some business to take care of, but I'll be in touch. Welcome aboard, Commander," she said before leaving. After she left, I looked at the ship floating in the huge bay. I looked at the side of the ship and smiled as I noticed the name, USS Enterprise. Dear viewers, we have come to the final part of our epic story, full of betrayals, personal dramas, and daring sabotage in the limitless space. This story is not just about the struggle for survival on a spaceship. It is deeper than that. It's about human emotion, about betrayal, about loss, and about the search for truth, which can be bitter. We've seen our heroes face not only external threats, but internal conflicts as well. It's hard to imagine a more difficult test of a relationship than a flight into space, where every action can be your last. In this part, we saw how the protagonist fights not only to save the ship, but also for his personal happiness, which is threatened by the betrayal of a loved one. The key moment was the realization that sometimes enemies are too close, and that trust is a luxury that can't always be afforded. Our protagonist's story is not only a struggle with external circumstances, but also an internal struggle with her own emotions, learning to forgive and realizing that some decisions have irreversible consequences. As for Tabby, her story reminds us that choices always exist, and every action we take carries consequences. Her journey, full of mistakes and bad decisions, leads to a dire outcome, the loss of everything she held dear. It's a sad reminder that sometimes one decision can change an entire life. But even in the most difficult moments, when it seems that everything is lost, there is always an opportunity for a new beginning. Both for our protagonist and for you, dear viewers, an opportunity to rethink what happened, to learn lessons, and move forward with new strength and confidence in the future. On that note, we end our story, but the journey continues. You can find the entire full version of this compelling story on our Patreon. There you will find not only additional details and in-depth psychological analysis of the characters, but also many other stories that give you a glimpse into the deepest corners of the human soul. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey. See you again in the worlds where every twist of fate can lead to incredible discoveries.